Since the first city-states rose from the Mediterranean soil, the question has always been how a free people might govern themselves without slipping into chaos or tyranny. Most of history's rulers answered with force, whether a king, an emperor, or a single will at the top of some form. But in Athens, and especially in Rome, another idea took hold. The people themselves could be trusted with the care of their own affairs. Not with mob rule, and not with an unchecked majority, but with a system designed to blend discipline and ambition, structure and freedom. This was the birth of classical republicanism. Classical republicanism is a system of government where power is shared, where law is supreme, and citizens are responsible for both liberty and the common good. In Rome, the res publica meant no one, no matter how powerful, stood above the law. Government was divided. The consuls, the senate, and the assemblies each held power, but each could be limited. The law stood higher than all. The Greeks and the Romans did not pretend the work was easy. They saw that unchecked power would always tempt corruption. Polybius and Cicero insisted that liberty depended on a citizen body that was vigilant, virtuous, and willing to hold leaders accountable. Rome's republic collapsed not just from external threats, but from within, when citizens grew indifferent and ambition gathered in too few hands. Centuries later, as Renaissance thinkers like Machiavelli and Harrington revived these lessons, the same questions returned. How could a republic remain free, enduring, and safe from tyranny? The answer was always the same: divide power, bind rulers to law, and demand civic virtue, and never leave the public good unguarded. By the American founding, these ideas had become the common language of anyone serious about liberty. The founders studied classical history extensively, frequently studying both Latin and ancient Greek. They saw the pitfalls and the promise of republican systems of governance. They also took lessons from key moments in history when the citizenry fell from liberty to the tyranny of single rule through their own ambivalence. To the founders, ancient Rome was not just a grand idea, but a blueprint for the kind of virtuous liberty that could result in America. Originally naming Washington, D.C. New Rome and modeling the U.S. Capitol on Capitoline Hill, they aspired to a greater future by reaching into the past and pulling out one of the greatest moments of self-government in human history. The Roman Republic lasted 4 centuries before it fell into the hands of the Caesars, whose rise reflected the neglectful public who allowed their republic to fall. These lessons did not fall on deaf ears. The founders' education and understanding inspired them to advocate for public education, the building of universities, and the establishment of a government ruled from the bottom up. They gave us the practical tools of republican government that we still use today. Here is where philosophy becomes reality. In the American system, classical republicanism takes its form in the separation of powers. Today, when you hear about the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, you are seeing this ancient tradition alive in the present. The executive carries out the law, the legislature writes it, the judiciary interprets and applies it. Each branch is limited. Each can check the others to some degree. No one branch is meant to rule alone. Each must respect the law and answer to the people. This is not just a technicality or a matter of administrative detail. It's the operating system of American liberty. When courts review a law, when you serve on a jury or vote in an election, you are living inside a system designed to protect freedom by balancing ambition, creating accountability, and giving every citizen a voice and a duty. But the stakes are real, and the lesson of history is sharp. In the final days of the Roman Republic, men like Cicero warned what could happen when citizens stopped caring for the public good. Rome lost its liberty not to a foreign enemy, but to the rise of men who placed their own ambition above the law. This warning is not ancient history. Within living memory, American institutions have at times failed to live up to the details of republican government. Black Americans struggling for the right to vote in the 1950s and 60s faced not just hostile crowds, but organized efforts by officials, local police, and federal agencies to suppress their voices. Civil rights leaders from Martin Luther King to Malcolm X were not only threatened by private actors, but also watched, harassed, and in some cases, targeted by agencies of our own government. The same era saw the assassination of leaders such as President John Kennedy and his brother Robert Kennedy under circumstances that remain the subject of scrutiny and renewed investigation, with documented evidence pointing to institutional failures and cover-ups at the highest levels. These were not distant acts of foreign subversion, but crises rooted in the failure to uphold the law, transparency, and public trust within the very institutions meant to protect the republic. This is what happens when power is allowed to concentrate, when institutions operate in the dark, and when citizens are lulled into believing that their role is unimportant. The collapse of the Roman Republic is echoed whenever law is replaced by secrecy, and whenever ambition or fear is allowed to rule unchecked. This is why classical republicanism is not just a chapter in a textbook. It's a living warning, a call to stewardship. Rights are protected not only by good laws, but by citizens who insist on truth, oversight, and accountability, even and especially when it is uncomfortable. To honor the republic is to remember its failures.